So
Good
welcome, welcome.
morning.
I love your background. I'm just so impressed. I feel like I should have that too.
So if my background suddenly drops a load of balloons in the background, I've got a team Zoom thing going on following an update that I haven't quite managed to work that one out yet. So IT are working on that in the background. But hello everyone, it's lovely to see you all. And do drop in the chat where you are, because I love to explore different parts of the world. And I know South Africa's we've got some people from South Africa on, so I not a country that I'm familiar with at all. So love to see that. But hello. Um, so Debbie Clement, VP of Talent for EMEA, big title, small person. Pax8 is a technology unicorn, but we're quite small. We only got 2,000 people globally. And in EMEA, we're 400. Basically started working with company when we were 12 people strong, and we joined, we were part of an acquisition for a EMEA expansion, and today we are 400 people strong. So grown up with a business, went in at 12 person, looked at the recruitment processes and scaled those processes to where we are today, 403 acquisitions in, so quite small acquisitions. Been in recruitment now for more than 25 years. That's scary, grey hair, but love every day. And still do not class myself as an expert by any means, because talent is such a broad agenda, isn't it? And every day is a learning day. And oh my goodness, what the last 12 months has brought us in terms of ChatGPT, AI, and everything else that's rolling down the pipe. Never in 25 years have I felt it move this fast. So love to hear your thoughts on that. And I don't profess to have all the answers, because every day I make a point of listening to blogs, reading stuff, following people, just to get a handle on where things are going and what we should be doing next. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell, isn't it, Jane? I think.
Oh, no, Debbie, you definitely are somebody who is humble, because you've got this amazing amount of expertise and experience. And I think what you've just said is already such a wonderful example for other people in the industry and other industries, is that you never think you've reached your
Mm-mm,
final destination. And
no.
you're constantly learning. And to hear that you read blogs and articles and learn every day is an inspiration, I think, for everyone. And I know you mentioned talent, and it's a term that I think people use and perhaps attach different definitions to it. So could you share your definition of talent and talent acquisition as opposed to recruitment? Similar, same, different? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've kind of worn multiple hats. So I started my career in an agency back in the day before LinkedIn and even Monster existed, on pump cards, as we call them, um, with just the telephone number, literally, and the yellow pages, and that was it. Um, so and recruitment, I love recruiting, but I hate recruitment because sometimes it can be so transactional, can't it? And I kind of liken it to, it's the difference between, sometimes it feels like speed dating, whereas talent is you're getting married and you're following that investment into your business, and you're tracking that investment and the return on investment in terms of accelerated productivity. And it's interesting when you're in an agency, the process is built for landing your fee and keeping your candidate engaged whilst you land your fee. And in-house, the process is built for return on investment and accelerated productivity. So whilst there are very many similarities in terms of approach, and I was in a recruitment franchise, which is where I learned my craft, with phenomenal processes. It was Management Recruiters International, brilliant franchise, best training in the world. And then I augmented that when I took it in-house, because some of those behaviors that or processes in agency land don't translate well in terms of internal. In agency, it's wonderful because you can walk away from your clients. In-house, you cannot walk away from your hiring managers. In agency, you can tell a hiring manager, sorry, I can't work this for you because you're being unreasonable. In-house, you're stuck with your hiring managers and you have to educate them. And every day is an education day with hiring managers, and we love them, don't we? But my goodness, they give us grey hairs as well, don't they? So, and they can be infuriating, but some of them can be absolute artful magicians and such good support in that process. And that isn't that why we all go to work on a daily basis? Because this is like talent and recruitment is every day is different, isn't it? And it can flip in 60 seconds. 1 minute you're on top of the world, and the next minute you've had a counter offer somewhere, and it's like, oh my goodness. So, and I have huge respect for agency recruiters, because until you've lost a fee, you're sitting on a £20,000 fee, and until you've lost that fee because a candidate has walked to another position, that's where you really develop your processes and build that kind of hiring muscle, I guess. So yin and yang in both areas, but yeah, don't know if that works for you all.
Yeah, sure, Debbie. I think as you've been speaking, I've been watching different facial expressions of the people in the room and seeing these nods and seeing that, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. So you're definitely hitting some targets here with what you're sharing. And I agree with you that we have reached a time of unprecedented change with AI. And you've been optimizing TA processes way before AI as well. And I know now recently with AI, you're continuing to have that mind and that approach. So perhaps we can ask you first to please share about how you've optimized those processes and what the impact has been. And then we can move on to the second part, which you spoke about, which is that pain of losing £20,000 you mentioned as an example, and how that might not be so much if it was a retained situation. But let's first go to the processes. Please do share.
Okay, so processes. When I was in agency land, it struck me that sometimes I couldn't work with my clients in the way that I wanted, because the fee actually did get in the way. But I took a sabbatical, ended up in a non-profit for a year. And in this non-profit, I was working with people who didn't get paid any money for doing the work that they did. And yet they would put in 12, 15, 16-hour days. And it was something that was a real wake-up call, because when you're recruiting people for a salary, and then you start recruiting people to pay them nothing, you have to have a whole different perspective on how you attract those people and how you engage them and what motivates them. So when I came back from the sabbatical, I thought, don't want to go back to agency, really want to work with small businesses and startups, but how do we do that? I broke down the recruiting process. I wrote down on a wall, on hundreds of Post-it notes, every single thing that went wrong in the recruiting process. Everything from, and you ask yourself that, it sounds like things like, why are applicants so poor? Why can't I attract the right applicants? Why do applicants drop out of the process? Why can't my hiring manager articulate what he wants to me? Why aren't my job adverts working? All of those kind of problems that you hear, you get asked about, things that go wrong, wrote them down on a Post-it note. Massive wall full of hundreds of Post-it notes. And then I grouped them. Okay, so profile, process, control, brand, and land. Every one of those problems fell into one of those pots. Some of them fell into multiple pots, and they were all interconnected. And that's how I would then rewrote the recruiting process based on inoculating the recruiters and the business against each one of those points of failures. Stopped counting when I got to 160 points of failure, looked at every single process, and then rebuilt on an ATS. And at the time, and we're still using Comeet, it was our ATS, rebuilt that process from the outside in. Most ATS processes are built from the inside out, built for internal efficiencies, built to give HR what they need in terms of data. Didn't do it from that way. Did it from the candidate journey, from the inside. What does that look like? And then rebuilt it from there. And out of that, we have now got, and it was interesting, there's 52 separate work streams, each of them with their own specific kind of activities in that work stream. And out of that, we were able to identify roles and accountability. So where those interconnects with HR and people operations and IT, where they all interface, clear lines of accountability on who does what and when, and what the ideal timeframes are. And that gives you a really good structure for a really good process. And then also every single candidate and hiring manager touch point, we looked at all the templates, all the messaging, how we wanted to make them feel at each of that stage. So how do we want a candidate to feel when they look at our careers site, when they look at our job advert, when they apply, when they get that first acknowledgement email? We use 90 separate email templates across our process, from start acknowledgement right the way through to the end, in terms of you've got the job, here's what to expect next, and here's your IT, and this is the timeline that will happen. So it is an end-to-end experience from the candidate's side. We've got a lot more work to do on the hiring manager, but that's basically how we built our process. And the tone of voice is your people. So you're building a community, you want to reflect that in every single template that you use as well. So it's a massive piece of work, and it's ongoing. It's, we have to tweak it and adapt it, but yeah, that's where we are today.
Sure, Debbie. I love the way you gave yourself the space to think in the beginning and just put everything out there, because it can feel so time consuming. I don't have time to do all of that.
Yeah.
But by now, I'm hearing 90 different emails, and I'm thinking, but that's perfect, because there isn't a one size fits all, and it's so off-putting to get an email that is just a script that everybody gets. And I love that you prioritize the candidate experience, because it's all about, as you say, how we make people feel. And my favorite quote from Maya Angelou, that people will remember not what you said, not what you did, but how you made them feel.
So true. So
yeah, true. Love that. And yeah, you keep on you keep on improving. You haven't stopped. You haven't said, okay, that's how it's going to be from now on.
No, because the market shifts. And I think one of the things that we do, and this is I'd encourage everyone on the call here to look at your interview framework. Is all of our recruiters operate the same interview framework. So we have something, I can't share it unfortunately because it is internal IP, but we have an interview jotter that consists of about 25 boxes that sits in front of our recruiters that they have to touch on in our interview. So we do a little bit of screening when we need to narrow down a shortlist, but our interview is an hour to an hour and a half long with our talent partners before they go in. So then when our hiring managers get all the information in a consistent format on every single candidate, in terms of we match on values and culture first, and we match on the whole person, not just the half person that does the job description. So so there's this rich data and dialogue going on before they get to hiring managers, which the hiring managers have access to, and can lean on and leverage.
Yes, love that. Culture and values first. And I think that is what people are most concerned about these days.
Yeah.
And I love that you give enough time in the interview. I hear about far too many people not being assessed correctly or accurately, or having a negative experience just because there wasn't enough time in the interview. So, and sometimes it feels like, sure, but we don't have time to have such a long interview. And I sometimes say in workshops, imagine you choose your partner for life based on an interview and a psychometric assessment. You wouldn't say, oh, that interview was too long. And we spend so much time with people at work. Yeah. So it is key to dig down and make sure that there's a fit. It's more expensive to rush that. So love that. Yeah. And Debbie, the retainer versus the contingency. What have you learned, battle with? What can you share from that?
So when I was in consultancy, because after the sabbatical, I had a small business consultancy that was recruiting. It's more mainstream now, but at the time it was pretty novel. It was having a clear market. Who are my customers? My customers were managed service providers, 2 to 5 million, no HR, 2 to 5 million turnover, no HR. So being clear on who my target audience was. And then I created I can do 12 hires for you in a year. It's going to cost you 3,000 a month or 5,000 a month, depending on how many hires a year you think you're going to do. And you pay me on a monthly retained basis. So that was a hiring model, and then you can do more than one client. I was running 5 clients at the same time. And it was really enjoyable because you get to know your client. You're almost like an in-house person, but you're operating in agency, so you can pretty much do what you like. Your traction with the client gets deeper. You become part of the extended team. You get to know the culture, really, really keen, and you get this long-term relationship as a result. So it's a retainer talent acquisition as a service rather than recruitment and a one-hit wonder. And for me, that worked for me in terms of the small businesses that I was dealing with in that target audience. But you'd need to look at your business model depending on which clients you were working with.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And it's slightly different to how I hear other people wanting to do retainers, where they say that I want to do a retained search for one specific role.
Yeah.
And so the amount that it'll be is going to be dependent on the seniority of that role. So it sounds like yours wasn't dependent on the level of the role. It was 12 roles at any stage through that year, combined with the TA outsourced service. So not just placing somebody. Okay.
And that's not going to suit everybody because it depends on your niche. It depends on your discipline, on your industry, and your geography. So, but I would still say discipline, industry, geography. If you're looking for a retainer, it's all about who you know in your network. And that's what people will pay for, isn't it? Is to tap into your network of relationships, as opposed to your network of job boards and adverts.
Yes. So Debbie, you've mentioned that's what people will tap into is your network of relationships, which is key, and people will be loyal to the people that they trust and they have a relationship with. What are the other benefits that you think a client would have if they have an outsourced provider on a retained basis?
For me,
why did they sign up? What was the benefit to them?
So for me, it's a trust thing, and it's market intelligence and competitive intelligence and information beyond the candidate. So what are other businesses doing? If you are giving me a regular stream of consciousness on what's happening in your industry, then I trust you as an industry networker, and that is where the value comes from. I get lots of CVs in the inbox. Do you want to hire this person? But for me, I look at it and I go, but you've not really taken the time to understand my culture and my values, and beyond information beyond what's on the CV. It's like, how is this person going to bring value to my business beyond the obvious? So how are they going to add to my culture? Are you aware of what other people are in my business and what the challenges are at leadership level, for example? So it's always information beyond the obvious, not just a CV. That takes investment, because some people will regularly send me an email every quarter, seeing how you're doing. Did you hear about this? I saw this. Are you aware of what this company is doing? They keep an eye on your website. All of those things. It's about building trust, and that can take up to a year before somebody will say, actually, we've got a real problem with this role internal, got to outsource it, got to do something different. I remember that guy, he's in my inbox, or this person, she's in my inbox, she's a specialist. I will always go to a specialist, not a generalist, for roles.
Okay, yes, that makes sense. And I think that is a tremendous benefit, and it does save the client a huge amount of time and money in the long run, allowing them that access, allowing them, having you as an outsourced service provider. And Debbie, if somebody is saying, okay, I want to do some kind of retained search, and I want to do it from the perspective of asking for a retainer for one specific role that I'm going to recruit for, then do you have any tips or advice on retainers in that context?
In terms of securing the retainer?
Yeah, securing the retainer, especially when other people are saying, well, I'll do this on contingency. So then the client thinks, well, why should I have somebody on retainer when there's a few people here who I maybe also know and trust and who are good recruiters, but they're working on contingency?
it's a tricky one, isn't it?
Mm.
Would I? It's always interesting having the shoe on the other foot. But yeah, I'm going to give you the kind of idea. My questions are, can this person match to my culture? Can I trust this person to work with me deeply, not just my hiring managers? And will this person stand by the individual that they're putting into the business? So I'm happy to pay if I know that you are going to do sourcing, that you're going to share that intelligence with me, that you're going to be completely transparent about who you've approached, why they've said no, what their salaries are. Even if that's screen sharing, you don't have to send me that, in a document. I want to trust that you've been across the area beyond sending out a job advert, which is what our own team can do. I want to pay for the skills that are advanced Boolean sourcing. Um, those are the kind of things that I want you to tell me that that's what you do extra that my team can't do. That's what I'll pay value for. And that you have the relationships with people, and maybe that you've even placed some of those people and you're aware that some of them are ready for their next move and you can match to my culture. And that's the kind of culture that they're looking for.
Okay, so it's about more than just getting the person. You're looking for the data, the analytics, what that tells you. And you're saying that you wouldn't necessarily even, expect that service provider to hand it over to you,
No,
but it's sharing
no.
of that knowledge and that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that we used to do when I was with MRI was we used to provide a post-search report giving people competitive intelligence around market sentiment, like what candidates have said about us as they've introduced us, what the average salaries are in that area and in different industries, and that's all added value stuff, and that kind of stuff we can share with our total rewards people. Are we competitive in the market? And that has value, and that is worth tapping into and paying a retainer for.
Yeah, I love that. And Debbie, I know when we spoke, you said that you're also being pulled into other speaking engagements that relate to AI and relate to how things are changing and changing really fast, as you said at the beginning of our session. And even though you've grown the team from 12 to 400, and seen a lot of fast change, this is the fastest you've ever seen the change.
Yeah,
So
it
what
is.
would you, yeah, I think all of us. So what would your advice be to people who are in the industry now with AI and with the unprecedented rate of change, for
Okay.
success in 24 and beyond? What are your tips?
If you are not using Chat GPT and experimenting with it every single day, you are going backwards 5 days. Every day you are not using it. And this comes with a health warning, because I jumped in last week to a couple of the team members and pulled a couple of job adverts because clearly they'd been written with ChatGPT. And clearly ChatGPT is full of hyperbole and superficial stuff, hideous stuff. So the key here is learning how to prompt and breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. And that's going to take practice. And yes, it takes a bit of time. But I asked the team this morning, I said, okay, who's used ChatGPT this week? What have you used it for? Tell me how you're using it. I used it this morning because we were advertising in German and English. And I said, if we're going to advertise in local country language, then we need a sentence on the bottom saying, but our global language is English and you need to be prepared for that. It could take you 15 minutes to word it in the right way without offending people. So I threw it into ChatGPT and said, basically, what's a nice way of saying this? And I put it in my words as it spilled out of my head. And I got a ChatGPT response back that was okay, but it was great after you've augmented it with your own words, your own tone. And yes, I had heard of midstream. Was it Midjourney? Midjourney, I think, is the other one for visuals. So that's one little quick stuff. Which job title is the best one to use based on what you're seeing advertised on job boards? Because you've got, for example, sales executive. If I'm a candidate looking down a whole list of job titles, what's the best one? What's the one that stands out? And ChatGPT can help you with formulating job titles and things like that. We had to have a name for a group huddle. Somebody put in a name into GPT. What can I call this HR group that does this? And it came out with a name really quickly. Fine, that saved us half an hour of nasal gazing over what should we call this group internally. Little things like that. I'm starting to experiment with our job advert template now, how we can use prompts to get the right information from ChatGPT so that we build our job adverts quicker, augment them better, and they're in the right tone of voice that we use in our job adverts as well. So, and job adverts are not job descriptions. Job adverts sell and job descriptions tell. So two different documents there. So there's just a couple of areas where we're kind of using GPT, but every single day you should be experimenting with it and testing it.
I love that, Debbie, and thank you for being so specific about the practical areas where you are using it. And I've had an experience where in a recent workshops at the end of last year where I asked recruiters to do some exercises using ChatGPT, and I was really surprised to find that some had still not used it, were still afraid of it, were still thinking, oh no, I'm going to be replaced. But as you say, I think that for every one day you don't, you're 5 days behind. That should speed anyone along.
It's quite scary. It is quite scary. Talking to some of the guys this morning, and we've got Copilot that we've been testing for Microsoft internally as well, similar kind of stuff. But we've been using that on intake briefs. So we've been running Copilot in the background, taking the intake briefs. And then when you click on summary, it is interesting. It's not working well because it's stripped out all of the nuggets and details that you want out of an intake brief that you can use in job adverts. So there's some real kind of watch points there in terms of how you use it and the blandness that comes back sometimes, I think.
And I think I really like the question that you asked your team. I think that's something that any leader or manager can learn from if they're not doing it already, is to not just say, so, have you used ChatGPT yet? But what have you used it for this week? And what was the outcome? And, what new prompts have you learned, or what have you learned about prompting? So I really like your approach of having specific, detailed conversations, because I think that's what makes shifts and has an impact. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody on here is using it in other different ways. It'd be great if you could pop that in the chat for other people, because I think having ideas about where it's saving you time, we could be so much more efficient. There's so much to do, isn't there, in recruiting terms? Oh, and actually, Julius said to me this morning, he said, I'm using it to structure how I approach some people for a specific dev role that he was working on, and just augmenting that and making it human. I think just make it human and put your culture and your tone in that, and it will learn over time. We do see that.
Yes. Yeah, thanks, Debbie. So please do take Debbie up on that. Please do pop in the chat box where you're finding it useful and where you're finding it helpful. I think we're probably past the days of, I can't share because otherwise I'm, damaging my own competitive advantage here. AI is no longer that. It's really the human side combined with that we need to continue to work on. So, and I know you're passionate about that too. Debbie, any other tips or tricks or advice for 2024 before we stop our recording and open up for comments and questions?
Along from keeping up to date with GPT, I think differentiate yourself by the surprising questions you ask in your interviews. There are so many people out there who have a really poor, superficial interview experience. So if you can peel back that onion layer and go deeper into the human that's in front of you in terms of, who have been their career influencers in life, what's on their bucket list, what are they most proud of, really tap into the humanness of the individual sitting in front of you. I think that is going to stand you in good stead in 2024 because we've got 80% talent shortages in some places. So the loyalty that you can build with that human that you are interviewing is the thing that will keep that person in a seat above somebody else poaching them. And we've got countless examples where people have been offered other salaries and offered opportunities to go to other businesses, but it's the human engagement in the hiring process, both the recruiter and the hiring manager, that have kept them in that seat and kept that culture palpable and visible to them. So I would certainly focus on that. When the whole world's going automated and dehumanizing, I would double down on the humanized aspect of recruiting for the next year to keep your talent with you.
Thank you, Debbie. And I think that's exactly what you built into your process. You didn't just see it as a process. You said you built it from the outside in, and you looked at the touch points. And yeah, so I really, really appreciate that. And I'm with you heart and soul. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience, and just for being a shining example of humility and somebody who is always willing to learn yourself. Really, really appreciate you taking out some time to share with us today. Yeah. So please do put your details into the chat box if you want people to connect with you, as well as thank you so much for adding your what you're using ChatGPT for. I will stop recording, and for those of you who would like to ask questions, share anything, share your ideas, please do so. And you don't worry, you won't be recorded. It's a safe place to chat. Don't always have those these days. And so I also tried to remove all note takers, so they won't be taking notes on whatever you say and share. But yeah, thanks again, and really enjoyed this time, and look forward to seeing you all again next month.